Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. It's about high time I reviewed this book. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know we love Malcolm Gladwell on this channel. Blink is my favorite work of his and I cannot wait to review it. So what is so amazing about this book? Is there anything wrong with it? Let's talk about all the hype behind this book. This is an incredibly popular book. It's very influential in its time. And just so you guys know, there are affiliate links in the description. If you buy anything through those links, like maybe this book, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel to keep making these videos. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam and I want to make self-growth normal. Because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. Alright, so first off, one of the best things about Malcolm Gladwell is his storytelling ability. This man leaves nothing off the table. He's a very conscientious writer and he knows how to present things in a way that's just unmistakable, undeniable, and somehow unbelievable. In the introduction, the statue that didn't look right, he talks about this statue called the Kouros in a way that makes you feel like you just have to hear more. He says the following: they wrapped the statue up, shipped it to Athens, and invited the country's most senior sculptor experts. This time, the chorus of dismay was even louder. Harrison, at some point, was standing next to a man named George Despines, the head of the Acropolis Museum in Athens. He took one look at the Kouros and blanched. Anyone who's ever seen a sculpture coming out of the ground could tell that that thing has never been in the ground. Georgios Dantas, head of the Archaeological Society of Athens, saw the sculpture and immediately felt cold. When I saw the Kouros for the first time, I felt as though there was a glass between me and the work. What? The director of the Benoki Museum of Athens said that he thought it was fake because when he first laid eyes on it, he felt a wave of intuitive repulsion. When you hear these things, don't you think to yourself, what the hell? I gotta see this thing. I looked it up and it's a statue of a naked guy. Obviously anyone who truly knows about sculpting and stuff like that it's much more than a statue of a naked guy, but to mostly anyone else, it's all this commotion over what? The writing, my friend, is what this commotion is all about, over here, at least. He finished the introduction with, in the first 2 seconds, in a single glance, they were able to understand more about the essence of that statue than the team at the Getty was able to understand after 14 months. Blink is an audiobook about those first 2 seconds. Mic drop right there. It's concerned with the smallest components of our everyday lives, and the study of this kind of decision making is something called the adaptive unconscious, and it's one of the most important new fields of study in modern psychology. It's a part of your brain that makes very, very quick judgments based on very little information. If we examine this more, Gladwell believes this would and this is the type of thing that he would write about, something that almost no one really seems to know about, and it's a huge deal. And he knows how to present it in a way that convinces you that it's a huge deal. He believes that this would change the way wars are fought, the kind of products we would see on the shelves, the kind of movies that are made, the way police officers are trained. If you check out this book, that's gonna scream right in your face. The way couples are counseled, the way job interviews are done, and much more. It would change the world. But in this review, I'm gonna go over the chapters, things I learned, things I liked, things I maybe wasn't so crazy about, if there are any. I mean, it's Blink, come on, but Malcolm Gladwell, dude. I'm also gonna go over some standout quotes, who I recommend this book to, and what books to maybe check out next. Chapter 1 is the theory of thin slices, how a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. This chapter was about a very important part of rapid cognition called thin slicing, which is the ability of our unconscious to find patterns in situations and behavior based on close to no experience. For example, they found that the difference between doctors who do and don't get sued for malpractice, the biggest difference is literally the tone that they use with their patients. One piece of information, and that's the biggest difference. If it's more dominant, it's the super. If it's more concerned and considerate, it is not. The more concerned and considerate doctors, a lot of them screwed many things up royally, and people chose not to sue them because they love them. Because they're, concerned and they care about their patients. Or at least they show that in their tone. This is just what they found. Chapter 2 is the locked door, the secret life of snap decisions. It's easier for so many of us to believe scientists and lawyers with pages and pages of info on why something is true, but Gladwell says that to improve the quality of the decisions we make, we need to accept the mysterious nature of our snap judgments and accept that sometimes it's impossible to know why we know, and sometimes it might just be better off that way. Isn't that strange? Chapter 3, this thing drove me off the walls. The Warren Harding error. Why we fall for tall, dark, and handsome men. This chapter almost kind of pissed me off a little. There's a president that most people have literally probably never heard of, and that president's name was Warren Harding. Take one look at this guy. What do you see? What do you think of what you see? also. He was the 29th president, and he actually died in 1923, 2 years into a full 4-year term. 29th president. And this chapter was about how the main reason he became president was literally his looks and how he looked. People thought this was a man worth looking at. After being elected in 1914 to the Senate, he was absent for the debates on women's suffrage and prohibition, two of the biggest political issues of his time. They talked about his steel gray hair and his thick, almost jet black eyebrows, his rumbling, deep voice. There's a clip of him talking on his Wikipedia page, and I have to admit, his voice sounds pretty badass. Someone convinced Harding to run for president, and he did, and he also won. He died randomly of a stroke. Many historians agree that he was one of the dumbest and worst presidents ever. I think there was what some reviews later in this chapter might have construed as racist, a whole thing about why so many Fortune 500 CEOs are basically tall white men. And not the type of reason you'd think. Not some freakonomics based reason. It's more of a psychological reason. And I have to say that it's hard to explain that without sounding racist or sexist. I think Gladwell did a pretty good job. He's sort of walking on eggshells with this. It's a little bit of a tricky subject. Part of the reason I have to credit him is that on occasion his work can have some pretty hard mid-left leaning undertones politically, at times especially talking to strangers. That book. If you've checked out this whole book or other books of his, you can probably tell what he was trying to say easily, but again, it's hard to explain. The remainder discussed a lot of unconscious bias and thin slicing that goes on behind the profession of car sales. I have heard other non-sales related books talk about car sales. Blink came out in 2005, and it is by far the most accurate depiction of this, almost to a T. Even nowadays with inventory shortages, shifting markets, etc. How do I know that? Do I really even have to say? Chapter 4 is Paul Van Riper's big victory, creating structure for spontaneity. What's so impressive to me about how accurate that was is while he did it, you can almost tell that he went out of his way to show the reader or listener what's going on in the salesperson's head during the job, and in order to succeed, what works and what doesn't. It was seriously elegant and diligent how he did this, but it's stuff like this that makes him my favorite nonfiction author. Here's something that stood out about decision making in the following chapter. Klein studied nurses, intensive care units, firefighters, and other people who make decisions under pressure, and one of his conclusions is that when experts make decisions, they don't logically and systematically compare all available options. That is the way people are taught to make decisions, but in real life, it's much too slow. Klein's nurses and firefighters would size up a situation almost immediately and act, drawing on experience, intuition, and a kind of rough mental stimulation. Chapter 5 is Kenna's Dilemma, the right and wrong way to ask people what they want. Here's where Coke screwed up while competing with an improved Pepsi that still was not as popular as the original Coke. But I guess Coke, they just saw it and they were like, well, you know, if they're doing better, we should do better, even though we're still doing better than them doing better. I don't know. And the Aeron chair also, a chair that looks like what Gladwell called the exoskeleton of a giant prehistoric insect. This dude has quite the mind. He does. The chair was originally so new that people couldn't get behind it. They didn't feel it. Later on, people became completely obsessed with it, and every chair decided that it wanted to be an Aeron chair. Sometimes your product is just trying to hit the market too early. You get immersed too much in your own product while researching and developing it that it's just not aged enough, it's not experienced enough, and it's just you and maybe your team working on it, not the public out in the open or private or whatever setting in which they're using your product. You know what your product is, I don't know. And chapter 6 is 7 Seconds in the Bronx, the delicate art of mind reading. Oh, this is the book that taught me about what a micro expression is. One lady struggled with depression. This was a story I didn't forget. 4 years later, after 1 or 2 times of hearing it, after the second failed suicide attempt, she went to a hospital and she wanted to leave for a few days. They asked her why and she said she wanted to see her family. Right before she left, she said that she actually meant to leave so that she could make a 3rd attempt. And they were like, how could we not tell this? They looked at the footage of her, of course they had security footage or something, and looked over it again and again and again. Eventually they noticed that right after they asked her why she wanted to go back home for a few days, right before she said that she wanted to visit her family, you saw this subtle expression of pure dread wipe itself across her face. You couldn't tell unless you looked for it, but it was there. I almost wonder why they don't teach the ability to see things like this in the place where you learn how to do what the doctor was doing. I've really only talked about a few of these stories. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more of them throughout the book, and Gladwell is one of the best storytellers I've ever come across. The way that he spreads details out, it almost comes off as so deliberate and like conscious that it adds so much imagery and you can't forget them. Some of these about like the police brutality and the car sales, the last time I checked this book out, I just didn't remember, but I wasn't really paying as much attention to those as the other ones that truly stood out to me. But that's something I always love about re-listening to old favorites too. Hopefully over the years you become a different person between listens and certain things pop out to you that didn't before, but the storytelling and how it carried its points and how it carried Gladwell's points across is so classic of him. And that's something that I remember. The organization is just meticulous. The examples are varied yet relevant even today, and I'd say Blink overall holds its value as a book. But everything from thin slicing to rapid cognition to adaptive consciousness to micro expressions and more, Gladwell does a splendid job explaining why we make some of the best, worst, and most ridiculous decisions as quickly as we do, and how some of the most trained experts don't even notice certain details that are the biggest ones worth paying attention to. I'd consider that worth looking into, wouldn't you? Quotes. I actually haven't seen this in a while, but believe it or not, there were literally no standout quotes from this book. Direction 1. There are times when we and other people make decisions that, in retrospect, we seriously do not understand. It's almost as if the decisions are made so quickly you can't even realize what is going on in the moment in a person's head that makes them do that. If you'd like to know what that is, I'd recommend checking this book out. Direction 2. If you like this book, my best recommendation is probably Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman or The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. I think Black Swan and Blink are like maybe cousins or like two sides of the same coin. I don't know. And if you're looking for something else by Gladwell, try The Tipping Point. Outliers and David Goliath are also very impressive. Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you want to check out. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I will see you then.